I'm Greg LeFevre. I'm an assistant professor in environmental engineering and in the Department of Civil Environmental Engineering and at IHR and University of Iowa. And I study emerging contaminants in water. And what I'm going to be talking today to you about is about neonicotinoid insecticides in drinking water. And you may have heard of these things before, probably because they're in the news and related to things with like beneficial pollinators like honeybees and everything like that. And that's a really important impact that neonics have. But what we're going to be talking about today is potential for human exposure through drinking water. So let's dive into this a little bit. So neonicotinoids are, or neonics for short, which is what everybody calls them, have pretty rapidly become the world's most widely used insecticides. You can see from these maps from the US Geological Survey, they're used mostly on just kind of a few specialty crops like citrus and orchard crops and stuff like that. And over the course of 20 years or so have become really widely used. And you can see in Iowa, we're kind of like right in the center of really high usage of these. And the reason why they've become so widely used is because they're oftentimes from in the environment is because sometimes they get sprayed, like we were talking about with orchard crops, but oftentimes they're also used as coatings on seeds. And so what they do is they go onto the seed, and then people don't have to spray it later because then it gets taken up into the crop, and it protects them from things like aphids and stuff that would normally destroy the crop of chewing insects. And they're also used in some other things. Like if you look really closely on some of the things like flea and tick medications for use for dogs and cats, sometimes you'll find them in the active ingredients. So normally your corn and beans do not come in pink and green, but that indicates that they're coated in some sort of pesticide. And like I said, most people have heard about neonics from or in association with things like harming honeybees or bumblebees, and they are insecticides, which that's what they're designed for. But obviously, they're not designed to go and kill the things that like honeybees, right? They're designed to kill those aphids. So we're going to introduce the most three common players here. These are the kind of the chemicals of what they are, and so the names of them are clothianidin, thiamethoxam, and imidacloprid. And I tell you these because we're going to kind of see them a couple of different times, and because they are the most common. And what you'll see from we won't get into the details of the chemical structure here, but what you see is that there's this one part of it that's really common in there. The way that this type of insecticide works is that there are parts of the central nervous system for insects that's different than what's in us or vertebrates or mammals. And so what the chemical does is it sticks to those in insects and kills them, but it doesn't go to us. So that's good. It's a very targeted system. And that means that it has a much lower impact to non-target organisms. But the problem is that they can still hurt harmful or hurt beneficial insects. And if they undergo some sort of environmental transformation, they can actually still be very harmful to mammals and fish and everything like that. Additionally, what's interesting and different about this type of pesticide is that these are very water soluble, which means that if they are applied in, say, an agricultural setting or something like that, they tend to move with water rather than sticking to the soil. Like if there's extra or something like that, if it hits the plant or it hits the soil, or it'll wash off with the water as opposed to sticking to the soil, which is what a lot of older pesticides would do, is they would stick to the soil. And because of this kind of unique property that they move with the water so much, here's actually a study from the USGS where they were looking in Iowa streams, and you could see this is the detection frequency of these three different neonics. You can see that they're really highly detected. And in the planting season, it's almost ubiquitous throughout Iowa streams. So they're really become really common, which makes sense because they are used really heavily and at high rate, and they move with the water rather than sticking to the soil. So one of the things that we did was that we studied how, knowing these properties, that they tend to move with water instead of sticking to soil. We did a study where we looked at how, if neonics were present in drinking water, and whether they would be removed by conventional drinking water treatment plant. And so the University of Iowa is really lucky to have its own drinking water treatment plant, so we can go in and do some really cool research right on campus. And what we did was we tracked neonic levels across the, starting at the source water, which is the Iowa River, and then going across the different parts of the water treatment process, all the way into some water, finished water taps right on campus. You can see the take home here is that conventional drinking water treatment does not remove these. This is pretty much to be expected because conventional drinking water is designed to remove particles like dirt and stuff like that, right? And pathogens like bacteria, E. coli, and things that would make you sick. And so it's not designed explicitly to remove a lot of like pesticides usually in the same way, and particularly not ones that move with water instead of sticking. Because if they were the kind that would, stick, they would probably be removed with a lot of the dirt and particles that would be normally removed. So this actually, when we published this in the scientific journal, this was very exciting to people and kind of a little bit scary to people and stuff like that, because they had never been detected before in finished drinking water, and it was on the Washington Post and BBC and stuff like that. And this is the first time this was happening. It's subsequently, people have been, once you look for it, people have found these all over the world in drinking water sources and even in finished water. And more recently, people from the College of Public Health have looked into groundwater sources too as well, because remember, it moves with water. So eventually when the rain goes and trickles through the soil, it doesn't stick to the soil, it goes through, and in wells, like in, not in places with city water, but with private wells, these have been found in Iowa as well too. So that's a really important thing. The one thing that we did do was, so that was at the university treatment plant with a conventional drinking water system. We also looked at what and compared, right? So in the University of Iowa has its own drinking water system, but the city of Iowa City has a separate drinking water system. So they're both kind of sourced more or less similarly from the Iowa River. But what we did was we looked at the same compound and kind of compared them and looked at, the source water, so that's the river, and the finished water. And we looked at comparing the university system with the city system. And what you can see here is pretty clear that the city of Iowa City's water does a much better job of removing it. And at first, largely these are very similar. They have the same source water. They have very similar treatment processes, except one difference in the unit operation, which is this stuff right here. And that's kind of looks like dirt, right? What it actually is this thing called GAC, or granular activated carbon. And activated carbon is something that you may already actually even have in your home. And that is it. Basically what it is it's a kind of specialized charcoal that people, like, for example, it's what is used in a Brita filter. If you take that apart and it's the black stuff inside. And originally it was added into it was when the new Iowa City treatment plant was built a long time ago. The water used to apparently taste, before I lived here, it would smell kind of fishy and taste bad. And so they put this in to address taste and odor issues with the water. What we were really surprised to find is that it is actually really effective at removing these neonics as well. So a benefit of improving the taste of the water is that it actually helped remove a lot of these emerging contaminants. So we've dug into the science of this, and one of the things that we've understand now is how this happens. And what we can see is that I told you a little bit early that some of them that are more insect toxic these are actually removed much more easily, and the ones that are less insect toxic and more potentially damaging to vertebrates like us, right? These are actually more difficult to remove. So one of the things that we want to do as the next step is understand if there's ways that we could engineer different types of activated carbon that could help remove these even better. But activated carbon is a relatively low cost thing that can be implemented in communities without having expensive or energy intensive things like nitrate removal processes or something. Like this is something that can be implemented relatively easily and can be very good at removing these. And so we've dug into the science of why this happens. So that's a really cool, science research, but has important implications. We also look at the other end of our contributions here too, right? So it's not just drinking water sources. We're also looking at what happens from wastewater, which is, this is the water that, when people water from your sink, your washing machines, your showers, and flushing toilets, right? It goes to a wastewater treatment plant. And so what we did was we actually were looking at levels of neonicotinoids in a stream that a lot of the flow from this, it's a very small stream. We were looking at the treated effluent from the wastewater treatment plant. So it's the treated water from here. But again, the water treatment plant is designed to remove pathogens and oxygen demand and stuff. One of the things that we did was we actually saw that there were levels of some neonicotinoids at levels pretty commonly above the level of invertebrate toxicity, sometimes even above acute levels. And this is in an area where they don't have stormwater mixed in, so we know that it's not from people's using it in their gardens or anything. It's from inside people's homes, and clothianidin is not actually registered in the state with use within people's homes. It's only like in agricultural uses. So this is a really kind of a curious thing, what we did in the study. And one of the kind of the take homes here is that we did a meta-analysis of all the different potential usages that are registered and looked at there are some pesticide residuals that might be in food. There could be flea and tick preservatives, like from a dog here, right? There might be from lawn and garden and pest control. Sometimes people use these, or sometimes they're even used by nurseries. We concluded this wouldn't be applicable because it's not there. This wouldn't be used on some of them, but would be on others. The levels we were finding was much higher than USDA food standards. One of the things that we found in here is that oftentimes these can be used in indoor pest control for people, oftentimes like in apartments and stuff like that. It will spray around the baseboards or other things. And these eventually work their way into the wastewater treatment system. But it also told us that this is inside people's homes, right? And dwellings and things, that this could potentially be an unanticipated source of pesticides directly inside people's homes, and oftentimes on floors and in other things where people might be exposed in other ways. So this is something to be thinking about from a health exposure perspective. So that is what I wanted to tell you about these neonics in water sources. And we know that they are in drinking water sources. We know that conventional drinking water treatment system is not designed to remove them and isn't successful at removing them. And that's because it's not designed to do that. But carbon filters actually work really well. We've dove into the science of how that works. And it's kind of unexpected, but it does work really well. And this is a way that people can actually do this in their home too, right? A Brita filter, if you knew that this was perhaps in a private well, that people can put this on in their little well tank or something, or put that. And we also know that around the home, these could be a potential for human exposure routes. So what is something that you could do, right? On a big picture sense, making sure that these are not part of, balancing what's used in terms of on pets or in the home, knowing what you're using inside of your home. And also from an agricultural perspective, using things as sort of like a preventative on seed coatings and stuff puts a lot of pesticides into the environment. In some places, using things like integrated pest management, people can go in and use the pesticides as a tool when there is an infestation of pests. But when they're not a pest there, or when there's not something, the conditions aren't right or anything like that, don't use the pesticide when it's not needed. It's an effective tool, but don't use it if it's not needed. Part of that is also because it is a really good tool. It's an important part of a portfolio of tools to manage agricultural pests. But actually, if you use them too much, then insects will actually develop resistance to them, and then they'll lose their effectiveness. So big picture, we want to make sure that we're managing these tools and resources effectively, both to preserve their use, but also to improve our water quality for ecosystems, because these have big effects on invertebrates, as well as protecting human health through our drinking water exposure. So I'm happy and available to answer any other further questions. And I have my contact information here below, and please feel free to follow up with anything. Thank you.